Secretary of State Anthony Blinken warned yesterday that China's government has made a decision to seize Taiwan on a, quote, much faster timeline under Chinese President Xi Jinping.
Beijing has conducted some of its largest ever maneuvers around Taiwan this week.
Since their missile launches, Beijing has taken an irresponsible step of a different kind.
The U.S. policy was for 50 years engagement with China. That's over now.
Almost half the global container fleet, nearly 90% of the world's largest ships, pass through the Taiwan Strait.
Tensions still rising around Taiwan. China halting some ties with the...
We need to be strong. That's what China understands. It's not words, it's not press releases, it's actual strength and presence in the region.
That's right. The two leaders expected to meet face-to-face at the G20 summit next week.
With tensions on the rise, the time for China and the U.S. to get together and make sure that this doesn't spill over is now. And so accordingly, we're now starting to see reports that President Biden and Xi Jinping are going to meet as early as Monday to sort of discuss what their red lines are. Now, don't let me report that for you. Here's what Joe Biden himself had to say about it.
I'm not willing to make any fundamental concessions. And so what I want to do with him when we talk is lay out what kind of each of our red lines are, understand what he believes to be in the critical national interests of China, what I know to be the critical interests of the United States, and to determine whether or not they conflict with one another. And if they do, how to resolve it and how to work it out.
Now, my response when I hear something like that from President Joe Biden is that although I do believe that he's trying to say the right things, I don't think he's saying anything at all. Because at the end of the day, we know what China's red lines are, and they know what our red lines are. And so the conflict is, do we believe that they're going to take Taiwan, or do we believe that they're just saber rattling? And so I'm not the only one who believes that. I'm going to show you a clip from Gordon Chang, who's the author of The Coming Collapse of China, and he sort of feels the same way that I do. And so here's Gordon Chang talking about that.
It's a little silly. We know what China's red lines are. They say it every day. I mean, all you have to do is look at People's Daily. We know what the Chinese want. We've been talking to them for more than 5 decades. During that time, they've become more provocative, more belligerent, more aggressive. We need to stop talking to China. We need to start imposing costs for increasingly bad behavior. And if we do that, then we have a chance of some sort of accommodation. But with the approach that President Biden has taken, and his predecessors too, but this approach does not work, and we can see it in China's behavior.
Now, I'm not a geopolitical specialist. I'm just an investor. I'm really good at valuations. I'm not good at understanding the nitty-gritties of geopolitical conflicts. But what I can tell you is that I personally have 3 red lines myself as to what would cause me to exit my Alibaba investments, and I would just take the loss flat out. And so let's dive into those, because I want to walk you guys through exactly what would cause me to sell my Alibaba investments. Now, my first red line is China either disallowing or disproportionately taxing share buybacks. Now, we're already starting to see more and more Western countries start taxing share buybacks, albeit they're doing it at very low rates. The US just started taxing share buybacks at 1%, citing sort of like corporate greed, which, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just giving back money to the shareholders. I don't see how that's corporate greed at all. Companies are in the business of making profits for their shareholders. That's why we invest in capital. These aren't sort of like charities, I would say. But with that said, US politicians have pushed measures to tax corporate buybacks at 1%. And here in Canada, we've also pushed similar measures where we're taxing share buybacks at 2%. And so what does this mean for countries like China? If they start disproportionately taxing share buybacks at very high rates, then it becomes a problem. You guys can recall that over the last couple of months, the repurchases that Alibaba has been making, and you can see it here in this chart, have been incredibly accretive as a share price has been challenged. And so this is something that has been really good for us investors, and it's something that's holding us into the security. But if China makes it so that these repurchases go away and they can't pay out dividends either, now we run into a problem where we can't extract a return from our investments unless they make a favorable investment into the company, and they already are. These repurchases are net all of the investments that they're making into the businesses as a whole already. And so this would be one of the reasons, or the first reason, why I would draw a red line and sell my securities. Now, the second red line is now that common prosperity is back, however those common prosperity policies are implemented, if they're done in a way that significantly hurts Alibaba or other Chinese companies that I would be interested or personally have invested in, that becomes a problem. Or if those common prosperity measures hurt the investors in any way that could disproportionately impact my valuation of the company as an investor, I would pull back as well. And if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, recall that as reported by the Wall Street Journal on October 23rd, so just recently, at the meeting that they just held in China, President Xi Jinping did bring back common prosperity. And so if common prosperity measures are implemented in a way that in any way significantly impact the future prospects of Alibaba or the shareholders, that absolutely would be a red line for me. So that's my red line number 2. You guys know what my third red line would be. If China decides to invade Taiwan, that's a huge no in terms of investing in the country. And recall, guys, why did this even become an issue as of late? And it became an issue because Secretary Blinken noted that China's government is pursuing its plans to annex Taiwan on a, quote, much faster timeline under Xi Jinping, the U.S. Secretary said. And so, of course, if that does happen, there's going to be a significant amount of global disruption. It's not just Chinese stocks that'll decline in that environment. There's probably going to be nowhere to hide because, once again, the winds of war will be blowing. However, that would be a very strong indication. Even if we start sort of sniffing indications that they're starting to move in or they're starting to maneuver, I'm going to start looking at exiting my Chinese investments. Now, some of you guys could say that they're already starting to maneuver. I'm not seeing that type of evidence just yet. I'm seeing a lot of saber rattling, but if in the event that that does happen, I will let you guys know. And of course, if I end up selling my positions in Alibaba, I'll let you guys know of that too. Now, recall, guys, that per the valuation that the Patreon members have access to at the lower tier of the Patreon, just that $5 level, you can see that I'm valuing Alibaba at more than $200 per share. And of course, that means based on the current share price, the company's trading at approximately a third of its valuation. Now, of course, if there's any sort of conflict with respect to Taiwan, if the return to investors becomes lower because they're taxing share buybacks at a considerable rate, or if common prosperity impacts the future growth characteristics of the company, as you can imagine, this valuation will go way down and it may no longer be an investment worth making. And so I will absolutely exit. So those are my 3 red lines. I want to know what you guys think about what your red lines are and how likely do you think that there's been conflict with Taiwan. Now, if you haven't seen my latest video on Alibaba where I explain in more detail sort of what's going on, you can get to that video right here.